I appreciate you finding us. Powers on Sports Podcast. And then there were four. Houston, Texas is the site this weekend. Final Four NCAA March Madness. No better person. We're going to bring in Mr. TJ Rives. No better person to talk to it. He will be in the building in NRG Stadium in Houston. TJ, part of the Coast to Coast College Basketball Coast to Coast podcast, as well as Bet US TV, as well as his great work as the Buccaneer sideline reporter. And we were actually, forgot to tell you this. You were there with us. I forgot to. We're covering the Big South tournament
right
after the final.
Yep.
Great game. And out of the blue, a kid comes up to you and goes, "I know you. You're the Buck sideline guy." TJ
Well, the
Reeves.
first thing is, I'm not expecting that in Charlotte after we've been working the college basketball game. But yes, the Buccaneer stuff is great, and it's great to be with you. And yeah, that's where all worlds kind of converged at once with the Buccaneer talk, the college basketball talk. And I can't wait to mix it up with you because we're almost to this weekend. So wherever you want to lead, let's do it. But yeah, that was a fun memory, you and I in and around. My God, that seems like it was like 3 months ago.
I know,
that was
right?
only 3 weekends ago. That was 3 weekends ago that we were at the Big South's championship game and then awaiting what was going to happen on Selection Sunday for UNC Asheville, the team that won that tournament.
Yep.
And here we are now, 3 full weeks later, ready to go into Final Four weekend. And we got an upstart Florida Atlantic, a lesser-known San Diego State, a first-timer in Miami with UConn. As I keep joking with everybody, including you, off the air and now on Powers on Sports Podcast, this is the Final Four that everybody had, right? This is what we expected. Welcome to it.
Just your first, when you really process that, FAU, Miami, San Diego State making a Final Four, just your initial thought.
Crazy. It is unexpected. And it's great. It's all of those things because the bottom line is here that it's a tournament and anything can happen once you get in that tournament. And Florida Atlantic has been really good all regular season long. And now they've demonstrated, just get us in there. I'm going to have to bring it up. They get in there against my Memphis Tigers in the opening game. They were seconds away from being eliminated. And nobody nationally knows Dusty May's name as the coach or John L. Davis, the star player's name, if Memphis beats them. But now they have in the last 2 weekends become household names for college basketball fans. They know who Dusty May is now, the coach. They know who John L. Davis is, an outstanding player. That's what this tournament is all about. And then Florida Atlantic follows it up, beating Tennessee, beating Kansas State. They are legit. They are legit. San Diego State is legit. I've been talking to you for 2 weeks about them, having seen them in person in Orlando, not far from where you and I are sitting and recording this podcast, and watching them courtside with their length and their defense.
Their bulk.
And now
their bulk.
They've won 4 games in this tournament. And we've got San Diego State and Florida Atlantic battling, and one of them is guaranteed to play for the national title, which nobody had. Outside of those schools' fan bases, nobody had that in the national title.
Absolutely. And you can really see this is the parody of NIL and the transfer portal. I think it's a good thing for college basketball that we have different names involved. Obviously, from a TV perspective, you can argue, do they like you like one Cinderella. I just don't think they like 3 Cinderellas in the Final Four. You'd love to have 1, maybe 2, but when you have 3 brand names that people around the country don't recognize right off the bat, it makes it, for the average viewer, if you're a basketball fan, you're going to watch, but for the casual fan, you wonder how much impact this will have on the TV viewing audience with CBS on this weekend.
Well, and you're right that there is not a Duke-Carolina matchup like what there was a year ago. And just the quick story in and around that from being there last year for college basketball coast to coast and on the TuneIn channel and the podcast and covering it a year ago. I mean, it was Tobacco Road in the French Quarter, and the Carolina fans wanted nothing more than to end Coach K's career with a bookend defeat. They already beat him at Cameron Indoor Stadium for the last Carolina-Duke matchup. So, of course, that was heightened even more. Besides the Blue Bloods, it was heightened by the backstory of this could be Coach K's final game, and his final game is either going to be the Saturday night semifinal or the national title game because he's already announced his retirement. So that just going back 52 weeks ago, that buildup and that weekend and the tens of thousands of Carolina and Duke fans Of course, you were going to have more interest. Of course, you were going to have more television rating. But that doesn't mean that this is not going to be exciting. And I think we're going to get two good games. I could be wrong, but San Diego State doesn't seem to play large margin games. So you're going to probably get a good game with Florida Atlantic. And then the question becomes, is UConn going to pull away from Miami, or is that going to be a good game? And I think the drama will build on Saturday night, and it's going to be a lot of fun. It's not the same. There's not a Kentucky. There's not a Kansas. There's not a Michigan State, a Syracuse, a UCLA, the brand names that we know besides Duke, North Carolina. But that doesn't mean that there's not going to be excitement and drama and 75,000 people in NRG Stadium and 15, 16, 17 million watching that second game Saturday night, which there will be on CBS. There will be. So I'm ready for it. I am ready for it. And let's see. But I concede it's not the same. I was there a year ago. It's not the same, but it doesn't mean that it's not good. There's my mantra for you.
And just watching this tournament and just seeing the landscape of college basketball, and you cover it every day. You do a show on BetUS almost every day on the sport during the season. The difference between a 3 seed and a 12 seed is razor thin. When we're really looking at the seeding, there really isn't much difference between a 3 and a 12 if you really are honest about it.
And as ridiculous as that sounds metrically, you're right. Because we can talk about this for another 10 minutes, but we don't have to. But look at Florida Atlantic as a 9 seed. Do they look like a 9 seed?
Right.
Have they looked like a 9 seed? And by the way, maybe their resume should have been given more consideration and more weight, because they were a top 25 program throughout the season. They were one of the last teams to even lose a game. They had beaten Florida at Florida earlier in the year in a head-to-head matchup at the beginning of the year, had won a couple of other games out of the conference that gave you indication this team can play.
Yeah.
So now they battled through Conference USA, and should Conference USA have gotten a second team just by looking at how they've played the rest of the postseason? I mean, as we release this podcast, UAB and North Texas are playing in the NIT, the secondary tournament championship game. What league are they in? Conference USA with Florida Atlantic. How many times did they beat Florida Atlantic, those two teams? Once. Out of 5 meetings, they only beat Florida Atlantic once. That was a really good league, but Florida Atlantic was really good in that league, as it turns out. And now you see proof of that. So, again, you go back and look at this and say, what's the difference between a UConn team that right now,
and they were a 4 seed. UConn was a 4 seed.
Do they look like a 4 seed? With the way that they have played in their first 4 games, with especially how they hammered Gonzaga in that championship, that regional final, that West regional championship game. So, yeah, they were a 4. And this is easy to do after the fact, to go back and say, well, they got it seeded wrong. But your point is the margin, the quality of play, the quality of players, the disparity, it's not that big anymore between the teams that have a small number 1, 2, or 3 in front of their name and the teams that have double digits, 10, 11, and 12 in front of their name. And even Princeton, who was a 15, who beats a 2 and beats a 7 to get to the Sweet 16. They beat a 2 in Arizona, they beat a 7 in Missouri, and they look like the better team in both of those games. And they had a 15 in front of their name. To your point about everybody's got players, and everybody in this tournament has a puncher's chance. And we now have seen that. I mean, Miami comes out of a situation, I know you didn't ask me this specifically, but this is back to your point. They got to go through the 1 seed Houston, and then, as it turns out, the 2 seed in Texas, just to get to the Final Four. So give them a lot of credit. That's a tougher road than any of the other 3 members that are in here had last weekend to beat the 1 and the 2. The closest thing was San Diego State beating the 1 Alabama, and then beating the 6 Creighton. Miami beat the 1 and the 2. Full credit to Jim Larinaga and his team, Jason.
All right, for a guy that's been in the broadcasting profession his whole adult life, Jim Nantz's final weekend calling the Final Four. I know you're a connoisseur of broadcasting and other guys that do great jobs. Talk about Jim Nantz's impact on college basketball. He's not retiring from broadcasting, but the last Final Four, last college basketball. Have you met Jim Nantz? You got a good any good Jim Nantz story?
So the answer to that is yes. I've met him on several occasions, obviously in and around this event or Buccaneer games with CBS, et cetera, and being with him, obviously most prevalent. When I was around him when we all had masks on at Super Bowl 55. for the Buccaneers and the Chiefs at Raymond James Stadium during the pandemic craziness of 2020. So yes, is the answer. I've been around him. And as much as the NFL and the Masters is a big deal, Jim Nantz is a college basketball guy going back to Houston, the University of Houston, where he went, and Phi Slamma Jamma when he was there with Akeem Olajuwon, Clyde Drexler. I know we're going back a ways for the younger audience.
Google it, kids. Google it.
Google them. Look them up on YouTube. Phi Slamma Jamma was something else. And that's where Jim Nantz really cut his teeth and became ingrained as a sports broadcaster, as a college basketball guy coming out of Houston. And to think he's done 33 Final Fours in a row. And he's at the stage right now where he's working year-round doing college basketball, the NFL, golf in the middle, the Masters, the PGA Championship, PGA Tour on CBS. How many more years do you want to do that when you get to your mid-60s, your late 60s, and Jim Nantz is almost 70 years old,
right,
doing this stuff? How many more years do you want to do it? So he's going to cut back from doing the basketball. It's remarkable the run that he's had in the games. And remember, the last time this thing was in Houston, Jim Nantz on the call for Villanova, last second three. The guy's name is Chris Jenkins. They'll show that highlight over and over again for Villanova beating North Carolina. That's Jim Nantz on the call 7 years ago, 2016. I don't know that we're going to get something equally as dramatic as that, but he's been around for a lot of these big moments. Yeah, it will be neat. It'll be neat to be around him one more time, as a lot of the different media people will be. And again, he started it all in Houston, and the Final Four is in Houston. So for his college basketball component, that's interesting symmetry on that.
It'll be interesting what CBS does, what kind of tribute they do, and how they intertwine that into the games on Saturday and Monday night. I'm sure they have a great montage put together.
Sure, and they've already made mention, they've already talked about and confirmed that Ian Eagle will take his place. And will it continue with Ian Eagle, Bill Raftery, and Grant Hill, or will they vary that up? That team has been together really for about the last 7-8 years, 8-9 years, something like that, with that team. And of course, Nantz did it for so many years with Billy Packer. This concludes the run. We keep talking about it.
Yes.
It's remarkable. Billy Packer's first Final Four, the late Billy Packer, was 1975. We are all the way to 2023, Jason Powers. So if we do the math, that is 48 years. 48 years, folks, that either Billy Packer with Jim Nantz, or Jim Nantz has been broadcasting the Final Four. 48 years in a row.
Crazy.
It's mind-boggling, and that's what's coming to an end when Nantz says goodbye on Monday night after the championship game. And again, he'll still be around for the Masters the next week, the NFL in the fall. Yep. How much longer all that continues, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, we'll see. But this is it on college basketball.
All right, let's get into the matchups itself. The two matchups. Let's start with the undercard. Obviously, FAU, San Diego State. The two upstarts. Contrasting styles.
I'm going to joke with you. Don't tell San Diego State they're the undercard. They're going to tell you we're the Mountain West champs in the regular season. We won the conference tournament. And by the way, UConn and Miami on the other side of the bracket, they didn't win their conference. They didn't win their conference tournament. Now, Florida Atlantic can say that. Yes, we did. We won the regular season. We won the tournament. So don't tell San Diego State they're the undercard, but I know what you mean.
But they are playing the first game at 6:09, which is usually the undercard.
That's correct. That's correct.
All right, talk about the matchup again. A stat that I've talked about for the last couple of weeks with San Diego State.
Quote it.
70 points is the number. When San Diego State holds their opponents under 70, I think they're 24, 25-2.
Or 25-2.
I mean, so that's the magic number. We know FAU likes to get up and down.
Here's one other thing about that stat. That means in roughly 80% of their games, they've gotten the game below 70 and or in the low 60s, mid to low 60s. And they did that to Alabama, and they did that to Creighton in these two games where they kept them away. That's a bigger, it would be one thing if that stat was 13-2 or 15-2. But in other words, 27 times they've been able to keep the tempo and keep the scoring to their pace, which leads you to believe that's what's going to happen Saturday. And the real question is, can Florida Atlantic beat them at that game? And I believe they can, because I think they're diversified enough with their guard play. They've got a couple of bigs, including the Russian Golden.
The Golden kid, yeah.
I mean, this is amazing what Florida Atlantic has put together with a couple of transfers out of the transfer portal and a 7-footer that's athletic from Russia in Vlad Golden, who didn't play. He played pretty well in the two games with Tennessee and Kansas State. But as you mentioned, the big bodies and the bulk of San Diego State are going to bang him around. They got a lot of fouls to give. Is John L. Davis the X factor? He made every big play at the end of the Kansas State game. Is he going to show up big again? And is his legend, is his maybe NBA stock going to go up a little bit on Saturday with whatever he does at the end of this game coming Saturday? Or will San Diego State sleeper hold their defense, their physical play? Will it grind FAU down? And it's the Aztecs in the title game. I'm just curious on the style matchups. If you're pinning me down early on in the Powers on Sports podcast, I think it's the Aztecs. I think it's San Diego State Monday night.
And remember, they've got
story for Florida Atlantic, but I think it's San Diego State.
They've basically got nothing out of one of their best players, Matt Bradley, for San Diego State, too, in the regional. They got nothing out of him either game, basically.
And still beat Alabama, the 1 seed, and then went on to win the regional final. So that's game number 1.
Yep. Listen to the Powers on Sports podcast. TJ Rives, college basketball coast to coast. Couple more minutes left with TJ. UConn, Miami. What a job by Larinaga. I mean, when you really look at the history of this sport, to take George Mason and Miami, 2 basketball nomads of epic proportions, to the Final Four is incredible.
And how about 17 years ago, George Mason defeats UConn, which was the presumptive number 1 team in the country, number 1 team in the tournament, and George Mason took them down in the regional final in Washington, D.C. We fast forward now 17 years, and Miami makes the NCAA tournament for the first time as a basketball player. Not Miami football, Miami basketball, as we keep joking about. They beat the 1 seed, Houston. They, in the regional final, beat Texas, the 2 seed.
Down 13. Down 13.
The reward, down 13. The reward, go play UConn again. And so Larinaga's got to be having flashbacks to that. But you're right. They were behind by 13. And I say it again to you, it says a lot for them that they didn't make a 3-point shot in the second half of the Texas game. Yeah. Miami didn't make a 3-pointer. In the modern college basketball, show me a neutral floor, huge win, a road win, a big NCAA tournament win, where somebody goes a whole second half without making a 3 and erases a double-digit deficit. That's a credit to them. They did a great job with the mid-range scoring, with free throw shooting. Tremendous job by them. What this game comes down to, does UConn's shooting continue? Because they really, since the second half of the Iona game, game 1.
Yes.
Basketball since halftime of the Iona game, they've shot it fantastic. They have been tremendous. So will it continue in this football stadium on Saturday? If it does, they're very tough to beat. Very tough. Not impossible to beat, but very tough to beat.
Because the inside presence of Sonogo and Klingon, and you got Hawkins, and then Andre Jackson's kind of the wild card. Not a great shooter, but just a facilitator, a energizer bunny on the offensive end, leading that Kentucky offense. Last question, I'll get you out of here. Where will you be? Where will you be? What's the media setup in Houston?
All right. So interestingly, they've gone to this setup really for about the last 10, 12 years of going into football stadiums. Because they have the court elevated, everybody in all levels can see a lot better with it elevated in the big video boards. So they seat the media, the overflow media. The big time writers will be across the way from the bench behind CBS. You will see them behind the bench, basically, or behind CBS. So, and there's another row really behind the bench as well. They've also got team broadcasters from the Final Four team, national radio with Westwood One, the international broadcast. That's all kind of in those couple of rows. The rest of the media is overflow, like behind the basket, almost the end zones of the football configuration. And I'm talking about several hundred of us are sitting in those overflows. So all the local media from Florida Atlantic in Boca Raton, all the local media from Miami, the local media from UConn, the local media from San Diego State, plus the local media in Houston, plus anybody else that covers this thing nationally that's not prominent writer, team broadcasters, you're in the overflow in the end zones. So that's where we'll be as part of this. And it's not a bad vantage point at all. And you got the video boards where you can see all the replays, and it is some atmosphere, and it's going to be some scene. Again, I say to you, I don't know that we can replicate, and I was in the building, and the building shook almost like an earthquake when Chris Jenkins made that shot for Villanova. I am imagining that while I'm saying it to you right now on Powers on Sports. The building was shaking. I'm not exaggerating. Charles Barkley was jumping up and down on the Turner set right in front of where our overflow seats were, and maybe the building was partially shaking because big round amount of rebound was jumping up and down. But it was crazy at the end of that. I don't know that we get that kind of finish Saturday or Monday, but it's going to be some atmosphere. It's neat to be part of this. I think ultimately it's UConn winning the second semifinal and UConn against San Diego State. I don't know. Get me to Monday and check back with me on how San Diego State looks, because if they hold Florida Atlantic under 70 points and beat them, I give them a great chance to win the national title game against either UConn or Miami and hold them down. They've been that good and that good of a story. So,
and remember, folks, the Chris Jenkins play was the exact same play Gonzaga ran to beat UCLA a week ago with Strother, basically.
Yes, it's the same. It's the same concept of come across midcourt and get the ball to a trailer behind you for an open look three where the defense can't get out on him that quick. And are we in store for something like that? I don't know. We'll see. It's going to be a blast to be there in and around all of it. And I promise to report back to you on how it goes.
So I know you're going to be doing some, I know you got to go. I know you got to go. I know you're doing some live content from Houston. Tell the audience what you're doing.
So you'll be able to find on, again, search for it on podcast, College Basketball Coast to Coast, the live tune-in channel as well, College Basketball Coast to Coast, tune-in premium. Go into the college basketball section, go into the sports area. You'll see College Basketball Coast to Coast sitting there. Live streaming shows Saturday, recap shows Saturday night, streaming show on that channel Sunday, podcast form as well, wherever you get podcasts, College Basketball Coast to Coast. You'll hear a Sunday show. You'll hear a Monday preview. You'll get a Monday night recap. We are there for the duration, brother, for the entire weekend. Whatever happens, San Diego State, FAU, Miami, UConn, looking forward to all of it, my friend.
I wish I could be there holding your sound cord, man. I'd come just to hold your cords. Carry the luggage through the Charlotte airport.
We'll just see what happens coming up in this, and it is some event. It should be a lot of fun to watch. I love having me on here. I love being with you. Thank you for the help throughout March with me. And we're going to come around to the NFL draft and some other stuff. Yep. So anytime you need me, Jason Powers, you know where to find me.
Enjoy Houston, TJ.
Thank you, my friend.
We'll be right back with Chris Perez, Cleveland Indians all-star closer, former closer, talking a little MLB opening day.